Good morning, everyone. It's great to have you here. I'm Eliana from Nirovision's product team, and it's the first time that I'm doing this, so I hope it goes great. Let's give people a few minutes to log into the webinar, and we're going to start soon. Oh, good.
So good.
I'm happy to have you here. It's good to be.
It's good to be here.
Yeah.
See everyone again. We've
I
been so
know.
busy, we haven't been able to catch up. So,
Yeah. I know. I just can't wait for being back in the same room. I'm getting the blues.
yeah. It's
Can I just point out that you two are not social distancing?
Mm.
For a very poor frame.
I have a mask for you guys if you need one.
Oh man, you want to get me in trouble with 3 different things at the same time, too?
Yeah.
The good news is even in Texas, most people are wearing their masks. It's very rare, unless you go to like a sporting goods store, and then there are people not. And then I asked the sporting goods store, I was like, did you guys just decide to stop enforcing the mask mandate that it has outside your store? And they're like, yeah, we never did. We couldn't.
Is that because they sell guns at the sporting store?
Because the type of people who go into the sporting store to buy guns are more rural. So it's a good way to put it. And if you're more rural, you're generally less informed, or you have what we call low information voters. So
One of my mates owns an American barbecue joint here, and he had to close down for COVID for 3 months. And the first night he was allowed to open up, he was only allowed 20 people in his restaurant.
Yeah.
And he's like, I can't make a profit doing that, so I'm just going to open up to everyone. So he let 120 people in, and got a fine for $5,000 for every person over the 20.
So you got half a million.
Yeah, he's bankrupt now.
Oh wow, that was a bad decision.
He was not smart, but he could make really good barbecue.
I bet. All right.
He's actually friends with Daz as well.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, guys. I think, are you ready?
I think we're ready.
Perfect. I think Glenn's ready as well. Let's kick this off while we wait. I know that people are slowly joining. Get that coffee ready. Get ready to hear us talk about the power of N. This presentation is going to be about 3 companies, but 1 solution overall. And that's why I represent Nirovision, but I'm joined by great guests. As usual, I'm spoiled with good company. I have here sitting next to me, Glenn Watkins, who's New South Wales Sales Manager for NESS Corporation.
Hi, everyone.
And little squares on the screen, but present as well. We have Tony Luce, Marketing Director from Nx Witness, and also Matt Harrison, Oceania's Manager for NESS as well. So hello, guys.
Just to be clear, our company is called Network Optix.
Yes, I know. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I usually talk a lot about NX, and that's why NX sounds simpler.
It's my fault. I made Network Optix into NX, and now everybody can't stop saying NX. So it's definitely my own problem that I created. So
It's easier to spell.
As long as they know the products, that's all that matters.
that's right. That's right.
All right. So what we're going to cover today, hopefully, and I hope this is a great and informative session. So we try to make it obviously about the products we're going to talk about, but mostly about use cases and real life scenarios that you can easily plug into your customer base and prepare and present solutions for your customers as well. But we're going to talk about NESS, Network Optix, and Nx Witness, as Tony mentioned as well, and Nirovision. We're going to cover some of Nirovision's use cases, and also I'm going to fill you in research that we committed with a research agency where we asked the Australian market what they're after. And obviously, because we are presenting a solution, I'm going to talk about the plugin for Nirovision integrating to Nx Witness, and what's new in this latest version. We're already up to 1.7 of the plugin. And obviously, all of this is powered by beautiful hardware. So Glenn is going to jump in to tell us what's the latest and greatest in terms of hardware and cameras from NESS Corporation. So without further ado, why we're sitting here? We're sitting here to hear about NESS. So tell us about NESS, Glenn.
Right, for those of you that don't know about NESS, we've been around since 1972. We're longest Australian manufacturer in the security industry. We do security, we do automation, we do medical products, and we even develop and have built a number of our competitors' products. It's not a very big market in Australia, and we've been lucky enough to be at the forefront of the security market in Australia for quite some time. Hardware is our main product line, and today with Network Optix and Nirovision, you'll hear about their software, and it'll all work truly well together with our hardware solutions. So as we move forward through the topics today, if you've got any questions on hardware, please feel free to ask.
Fabulous. And we have Vic behind the scenes monitoring those questions, and I know you guys are going to give me a hand with that. So yeah, keep them coming. And of course, it's up to you, Tony, Matt. I don't know who wants to take this.
Yeah, I'll do an introduction, and Matt can go over the Nx Witness slide next.
Perfect.
So Network Optix, also known as NX, was founded, we're based out of Los Angeles, a small area outside of Los Angeles called Burbank. If you watch like The Price is Right, you probably heard Burbank and the Holiday Inn, because all the contestants of The Price is Right stay at the Holiday Inn in Burbank. So that's where we're located as a company. I'm actually based out of Texas now. Since COVID began, I moved down to Texas, and so I guess I'm in the Texas office. And the company was founded in 2010. The first release of what is now the Nx Witness product was 2012, second half of 2012. 2016, we were identified as the #7 fastest growing software company on the Inc. 5000 in the US, so we include that because it's cool. In 2017, we added the cloud layer, and in 2019, we added the plugins and the metadata SDK, which is what Nirovision uses to build their integration with our Nx Witness product line. The company as a whole is growing every week. As of the latest count, we're around 100, I think a little over 100 full-time employees. About 80% of our team is technical, really software developers and tech support and engineering. And then there's people like Matt and me that are on the soft side of the business.
The not technical side.
Well, even our not technical guys are pretty technical, so we can explain how this stuff works.
You did make it sound like there's a technical side, then there's us.
There is, you know, I mean, Matt, compared to me and the engineers, I think you're non-technical, but no, I'm just kidding, man. I mean, everybody in this business is technical to some degree, but the sales and the marketing side of the business is a smaller part of our business, obviously. And that's because we create products not only for ourselves, but also for other companies. Like NESS does hardware for other companies. We do software for other companies as well. So we have people all over the world, obviously. Matt is based out of Adelaide in Australia, right?
Yep.
Make sure I'm correct. And then
we got Ryan.
We have sales offices in Taipei, Amsterdam. We have some guys in Paris, and we had a guy in Barcelona. I think he's in the UK at the moment. And then Kiev, Ukraine, and then our development teams are primarily based out of Moscow, and our headquarters is in Burbank, like I mentioned before. So that's Network Optix.
Cool. And
in terms of Nx Witness, I'll let Matt introduce the Nx Witness VMS product.
Yeah. So hopefully, you know, most people have actually seen Nx Witness before, but I mean, few of the things that make us I won't say better, the advantages of using us as opposed to other VMSs is it's extremely lightweight. You know, basically, we can run on a very, very small server. So we can actually run 4 cameras on something as small as a Raspberry Pi. The actual install file size is less than 200 meg, which if you compare us to some of the other ones which are into the gigabytes, is a fair difference. It's extremely powerful. You can manage 128 dual streaming HD cameras on a single core of i3. It's, as I said, it's a powerful, easy to use VMS. It's fast. I do this demo a lot, and I actually use Tony's system at his house. I can search through 1 year of archive for motion in about 1 second from my phone on the other side of the world. Yeah, that's one of the best-selling features of NX, is that, you know, trying to find video that you're looking for is quick and easy to do. And as it says there, we've got free developer tools and that works with the NX ecosystem. So you can actually build plugins and bits and pieces that you want to do to make it better for yourself. We actually had a school make contact with us yesterday and saying they want to actually start using NX in their developer program in their school. And if they're allowed to do that, we're like, of course.
Of course.
Go for it. The funny part about it is, it's actually the school my son is enrolled to go in next year by coincidence.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, one more thing I'd add too in the lightweight part, just because it's a very important point, is a lot of times with third-party VMSs, you have a lot of prerequisite software requirements and hardware requirements. So when we say it's a 200 megabyte installer for the client and server application together, that includes all the software that you need to run our software. So there is no extra database, there's no extra .NET version that you need or anything like that. If it's for Windows or for Mac environment or for Ubuntu Linux, Mac is just client only, but for Windows and Ubuntu Linux, you can install the software right away. Don't need any extra software to go along with it. So in terms of setup, I think, Matt, you guys had like a competition where you had to set up like install the system, set up 64 cameras and find those 64 cameras and get them recording, right?
Yeah,
that took like
4 minutes and 42 seconds.
There you go, 4 minutes and 42 seconds. So
that was actually a really good demo site that we did. It was 64 cameras, 4 different brands, no universal passwords, all bits and pieces like that. It was a really good little system. The closest to us was an hour and a half. One of them was over 6 hours, and we were 4 minutes and 42 seconds to be up and running and recording.
And that's kind of like how we designed the software, because we came from the industry. We saw the big problems with, it used to take me 6 hours to set up a demo, like Matt was saying, for Linnell video management system, right? When I was working for Linnell, and that is just kind of unacceptable. So we tried to solve those problems.
Absolutely. All right, so that's a beautiful segue for my next slide to say where we come into play. So we talked about world-class hardware when NESS introduced NESS, and you guys talked about advanced video management software, which is the NX platform. So Nirovision is the analytics portion of this piece, of this solution. In a nutshell, it's an identity recognition platform, that's what we call it, that leverages facial recognition technology to build safer, smarter, and more secure workplaces. So we founded the company a couple of years ago with the intention of using deep learning to identify people from security cameras. Our company is Australian, so every piece of software that I'm going to show you, including the engine and the algorithms that we run for facial recognition and detection, they're all proprietary, built by us. We are a small team working off our Sydney headquarters. We have a support team ready, a machine learning team that designs and builds these algorithms as well. And we've been advertising Nirovision and helping our customers improve workplace health and safety, aiding decision-making, obviously, by bringing AI to process large volume of data and bookmark it for easier consumption. Optimize operations, obviously, from collecting all this information and distilling into insights that you can use them to make better decisions in your everyday business life, and better serve your workers ultimately, because this is all about keeping a workplace safe. And a workplace is comprised not only by customers, but also by staff member, employees, visitors, and everyone that shows up. So I stole this from NX. So this is something you wrote, Tony, but and at the bottom is a beautiful, flexible timeline that everyone's used to seeing now, but bookmarked. So in general, when you're talking about computer vision solutions, you generally, or it's generally agreed that either you use it to augment video allow operators to accomplish tasks quickly and more accurately. So basically helping process large volume of data and embed that data with metadata that then you can use to find people more easily, alert or react in real time when someone's in the picture. And also in certain solutions, you also automate a process and remove the human operator completely from that step to trigger a system reaction or kick off a process. So in terms of the NX environment, that translates to a bookmark timeline, but ultimately what we want is we want to be able to edit this information that we're consuming, that we are consuming from the cameras in a raw state, and output insights that you can use to react in real time or to drill down into a review or a historical review process. So this is in general though, but obviously there have been a few things going on in 2020 that there's no need to recap anymore. So we used it as an opportunity not only to go back to our customers and to ask them what they needed in this time and what type of technology they could use in these particular times, but we also commissioned a research effort through a research company here in Australia, which we're going to publish the results eventually, and I'm sure that you're going to get a beautiful white paper out of it. So in this commission, one of the questions we asked people was what you're more afraid of during the time of COVID, and obviously impact to the business showed up, but personally getting sick and impact of mental health were also high up there, obviously not surprising anyone with those numbers. But what we found surprising is that the facial recognition technology and temperature screening technology were brought up as one of the very likely investments in the APAC market. And the reasons behind the decision were twofold: to prevent risk on one end, but also to minimize outbreaks and minimize the chance of future outbreaks. And suffice to say, obviously, an outbreak of this sort could have a massive impact on workplaces and yield compliance problems and obviously the monetary losses. So due to this reason, we are presenting then, instead of talking about features like we normally do, how you can use these features to better address these concerns that I'm sure are on everyone's heads at this time. And the question comes up because there are multiple facial recognition vendors in the market, and it's very tricky to figure out which one is the best and what are the differences between them. So I distilled that for you in this slide. These are, in a nutshell, the benefits of using Nirovision as opposed to other solutions. So Nirovision in the mix helps you do accurate identity checking, and that means low latency and high quality facial recognition results using the algorithms that we built and that we're continually improving and enhancing as we move on. Because of using identity checking, that means you have a record of who was in your premises at all times, and that detailed record with timestamps and camera details and location details helps you then do efficient contact tracing. So you can very quickly generate a report that tells you how many people was at your venue, who came into contact with who, so that is people seen in frame together, and also people that were seen during a customizable contact window that you can consume in the apps quickly, like Matt is used to doing with his phone, or you can also export it to a CSV for further data manipulation. We also help you be compliant with a display solution, a highly configurable feedback system that we call Doorkeeper. And Doorkeeper helps inform staff, visitors, and employees of their temperature results if there's a thermal camera in the mix, but it also can act as a lightweight source of access control by letting you go or stopping you if your temperature result isn't accurate, for example, or if you haven't fulfilled the safety procedures that some companies go through, which involves QR code scanning, temperature checking, and sometimes a checking that involves a face as well. And all of that behind the scenes is includes rich activity logs. So ultimately, every time someone is recognized or is deemed as a no match, there's a record of that in Nirovision that you can review if you need to fix that result. But then you can also review it to gauge insights about activity at your venue, get idea of traffic, what are the highly trafficked areas or the low trafficked areas, how many people were there every time, and obviously accompanied by temperature metadata if there's a camera in the mix. But There are two, then we said there are two ways to consume this type of information. You either do it in a proactive way when you're looking at the logs and finding who you're after, but then you can also configure real-time alerts. And Nirovision has real-time alerts, but NX has real-time alerts as well. So whether you're using the system as standalone or you're pushing all that metadata back into NX, you can configure real-time system actions to trigger processes without any human in the loop. So I'm going to go into detail of this, but try not to bore you with slides, and then we're going to jump into the system to show you. Identity checking, then, it's obviously the premise of a facial recognition solution, but it's not just facial recognition. We have a full pipeline of algorithms that track your face through the frame, that distill those faces in terms of quality, so we can judge the accuracy of the result and also the accuracy of the information that we're getting. And because there's an edge server running on the customer premises, those results have very, very low latency, so they're quick. And combine that with the algorithms we create, the results that produce have a very high quality. And every time then that person is seen, or that a person that is in your identity database is seen in your premises, you can configure an alarm to let you know in real time, or you can just know by reviewing that metadata in the comfort of your NX environment or in the Nirovision system as well. So typical morning in the office, I come every morning, I prepare my mate. I don't know if you've seen that before, but I'm from Argentina, and that thing that I drink is called mate, and it's like a tea, and you make it in a pot, and that's why I'm walking with my thermos. And as you see, and I made it in a GIF because, you know, Murphy's Law, I didn't want to trigger it in real time. But as you see, the minute that my face is seen, we get the alert in Next. We get the custom recognized event for my identity because I configured a rule with it. And I get the activity record then in Nirovision. In a nutshell, what's happening behind the scenes is we are feeding the system faces. And I am using, the first face you see there is from my driver's license. The second is a selfie from my phone. The third one is also a selfie. And the fourth is wearing a beanie when it was still wintertime around. So faces come in many, many forms. And faces come in many, many qualities. Every time a face is detected in our system, we transform that to a numeric representation that we call embedding. And that embedding can't be re-engineered into a face. So the minute you upload a face into the system, or that you use a face to construct an identity, whether you consume it from the cameras, you take a photo, or any source, we are immediately at the server level transform that into an embedding. And that embedding is then the representation that we compare. So obviously, every time I demo my interface, and that's why you always see those faces lying around. But ultimately, what we're comparing is embeddings. And we're comparing embeddings means that the source of the face and the quality of that face also needs to approximate to the quality of the faces that the cameras are seeing to get to the accuracy point of the model that the model intends to have. And that's why the first four faces are highlighted, but then the second two faces are also faces, right? Halfway faces, occluded faces, dark faces. The worse the quality of those sources, the worse the results and the accuracy of the system all in all. So because this is a real life deployment and we are working with real life people that aren't always smiling and glossy and shiny.
You're pretty much smiling in most of the pictures.
In that example, though.
There's not a lot of work getting done. Yeah.
Those examples, I need to start making grumpy examples so
That's
people
it.
would believe me. But so what I was saying is obviously there's the reference photos then end up having an impact on the quality of the results, and that's why a product like ours has not only the facial recognition algorithm itself, but tools that help you improve your identities so you can get to this point, even if you start off with a low quality photo, which is mostly the case in some of our blacklisted customer scenarios, some of our self-excluded customer scenarios. They come to me and say, I mean, this is all I have, is this lousy photo of this individual that I can't even recognize. And you input into the system and you're not obviously gonna get great results to begin with, but as the system runs, you start adding more faces to them and you get to those reference embeddings get into a better state and therefore easier to match. And behind the scenes then, all these smiley faces down there were tracked from me making that walk, only to produce a result like this. So on the left, the NX environment, on the right, the Nirovision app. The walk that I showed you involves me walking past 4 cameras that we have around the office. So that's why there is an event in Nirovision for each of the cameras that I walk past, and the equivalent in NX if those cameras were paired in NX. And as you can see, there's metadata flowing to both Nirovision and NX. So those faces I showed you, those labels that I showed you before, which is the object we use to group identities into watch lists, and temperature metadata if there was such a thing connected to the system. All of that you can make your way into NX to find. And if you're in NX, obviously you can query both the objects of the face with the metadata or the custom events that you use to create your rules. And in Nirovision, you have all the metadata displayed in the identity profile and also in each of the events as a result of the system working by itself. So talking about bookmarking, talking about leaving references for you to go back to your footage and review quickly. This lightweight search that Matt mentioned as well comes into play because you can search back through hours of metadata very, very quickly by just inputting some values in your notification panel.
Yeah, I would add one thing, which is that the metadata is stored in both locations. So even if you lost your connection to your Nirovision system for some reason, as long as that information, that metadata was captured with the video, it's going to exist in its own metadata object database inside of Nx Witness VMS. So you'll still be able to search through and look at that metadata, even if somebody took a baseball bat to the Nirovision stuff for some reason, right? Or it blew up. Right, you still got that metadata, and vice versa. If you lose your connection to your Nx Witness system, you're still going to be able to see that metadata in the Nirovision system. So it's never going to be lost.
And even if your bad exercise goes even worse than it did, Tony, and the guy destroys the server altogether, there's always a backed up encrypted copy of your identity model in our cloud infrastructure. So the minute that you have a server back, you don't have to start from scratch. You can recover your model and be up and running, and hopefully better protected for the next time the guy comes with a bot.
Yep.
So the tools that I mentioned briefly, and tools that you don't know you need until you do need them. One of them is an import tool that we created to easily onboard identity databases of people. So there's usually either an HR system or a payroll system or a self-exclusion list where customers have already an existing database of profile photos with some data. Sometimes it comes with an identifier, sometimes it's de-identified, it's just an employee number. And it's a nice segue into some of the conversations we had yesterday with during our privacy webinar. But ultimately, you need a quick way to be up and running, and you can't spend 6 hours setting up the system. So we create an import tool that lets you add up to 1,000 images at once. That import tool also runs recognition. So if you have a pre-existing identity, it will alert you of duplicates. And obviously it removes the need to do this manually, which could cause duplicates and human error as you do. And at the same time, I also mentioned that you can start with a low quality photo, but by having the system running, we can immediately collect faces that you can add to those identities. And that's why our improvement tool comes into play. The improvement tool will then let you find easily more faces. And the cool thing about it is, usually when you try to increase the reach of the faces that you get for an identity, you have to adjust thresholds that I mentioned before. Those thresholds change the determination of the verdict, whether that person is considered to be a match or not. So if you change the threshold, you're effectively changing the reaction of the entire system, but the tool lets you change the threshold on past results. So you're not changing the that verdict variable at that level, you're only changing it to find more faces to add. But it's gonna make more sense when I show you. So coming to these, coming back to the research, identity checking wasn't the only thing that we came to ask the market about. We asked them what procedures they had implemented to be better prepared for COVID-19. So, of course, yeah, at least in Australia, it's not, contact tracing is not widespread mandatory for every single business. So it makes sense that the number is not 100%, but more and more businesses are being deemed to need to keep contact tracing records. The time of record keeping and the detail of those records varies from state to state and from country to country, so I don't dare to generalize. But in a nutshell, in Australia at least, contact tracing has been implemented and people are checking temperatures at least once a day. So we wanted then to, by virtue of checking faces constantly, we obviously produce activity logs that I mentioned before. But sometimes it's not about collecting information. Sometimes it's about exposing information in a way that's easy to consume. So our customers in some industries, for example, need to provide contact tracing details about workers' shifts and attendance within 2 and 4 hours of an event with a positive test result. So how do you manage to produce a record like that with that level of detail and accurate enough to guarantee that the information provided is truthful in 2 to 4 hours? If you're doing it manually, it beats me. So that's why with Nirovision, we created this contact tracing report that you can explore in the apps in an active manner, or you can produce a report to export. And of course, because it's a system that's automatically doing it by automatically checking identities and registering those results, it's an unmanned system. It gives you very, very detailed logs that tell you which cameras that person walked through, at which times, how many people were there at that time, and if people crossed frames. So Glenn and I were using this camera as part of our contact tracing in Nirovision via NX. We would both be highlighted as being in close contact because we obviously been in frame together. It's less time consuming because you can just program it in the system by virtue of having the system running, it works by itself. And because it adds video context, and if NX in the mix, that means video for as long as your retention lasts, you can add context to the event. So it's not just as simply as saying, yeah, you tapped in and there you are. You can have detail, and obviously the more cameras you have in the mix, the more detailed the report. And the report then in Niro lets you specify a time frame in a contact window, and that contact window controls how far back and how before and after the event we look through footage to find those events to highlight for you. And as I said, the report can be explored live, so that carousel that you're seeing, each of these video clips is coming straight from the server, and it's playing in real time. And at the bottom, you can also find people that were in the same location. So for example, when I did that report for the gift, this gentleman who works in the building and comes to repair the ceiling had only been in the elevator briefly that morning, and he showed up in my report because we recognized him when the doors open, and it made for a very, very nice loop. But in a nutshell, this report then lets you review actively or produce a compliant report. And I failed to mention, but this includes as much metadata as you have stored against your identity. So if you have a thermal camera, that would include a temperature result. To produce that report then, what we are doing is we're crunching all those faces that you see on the left, those faces that were collected through the 4 cameras that I used in the example. So those 4 events are the representation of each event in Nirovision. And on the right, what you see is the exported event with the 2 CSV files that we produced. The first one is a detailed log of my activity in the venue. So you can pretty much draw my movements since I came to the office. I made mate, I went to the kitchen, and I went back to my desk. And at the bottom, the second report highlights the contacts, the close contacts, and people that were seen within the contact window you specified. So as you can see, as detailed as it gets, timestamp, camera, location, identity, the labels, and a temperature result in the mix. We talked about temperature. If there's a thermal camera in the mix, what Nirovision does is it creates a record for those temperature results. And these records can be consumed then to produce reports. They could be used to trigger real-time alerts, whether you use an absolute threshold or our baseline calculation, which is a more accurate calculation of your temperature using many data points. At the same time, this type of procedure using a thermal camera involves it doesn't require someone to be manually standing there like a thermometer gun does, and automatically creates a record. So it's not ephemeral, and you can come back to it if you need to review results. When it comes to temperature, though, one of the things that we've seen happen is that you are faced with a temperature gun or with a temperature screening unit, and sometimes you don't get feedback of that result. So sometimes people are approaching a venue and they really don't know how to react, whether that's an employee that goes through a temperature check every day as part of a safety protocol, or a visitor that comes to an aged care house and needs to be informed of what's going on. So in addition to the ability to integrate the thermal cameras and create records, we've developed a display solution that's called Doorkeeper. And it's a live feedback system that operates on an Apple TV or an iPad. And the objective of Doorkeeper is to give clear instructions. So you can configure rules in Doorkeeper that if the result of a temperature screening is below a certain threshold because the person in front of it is wearing a hat, Doorkeeper can alert that person and say, hey, your temperature result is incorrect. Could you please remove your headgear and take your temperature again? But at the same time, it doesn't have to be about temperature. It could just be greeting someone and confirming their identity and that they are authorized to be in that area and allowing them to go, or denying someone access when they're not meant to be there. So a few examples of Doorkeeper uses are in some of our customers go through a temperature check every day, and they use Doorkeeper to display a positive or a negative message depending on that result. Sometimes it's just to let visitors know that they've been granted access if they've been authorized to be in an area, and something we're working on. So I'm just giving a nudge of information there that you'll eventually know more about. You could also use Doorkeeper to display a QR code to bring up a contact tracing form and do the whole process and linking it back to the identity at the end instead of keeping disparate setups. But then inwardly, some of our customers use Doorkeeper to keep security guards and receptionists informed. And depending on who you're facing it to, privacy controls may be more or less meaningful. In aged care, for example, one of our aged care customers has chosen not to display names, but they display the positive and negative message, and it still informs and gives out a sense of comfort. I've made a quick recording to show you what that looks like. This is one of the modes of Doorkeeper. This one is not operating as temperature, so it's just me walking back with my mate this morning. And as you see on your right, you can see a record of the last few people that were seen. In this case, obviously in our office, everyone is authorized, so all you see is green. But if someone that wasn't supposed to be there was there on frame, you would see a red highlight. And I've configured this Doorkeeper in the office to display full names and labels, but you don't have to. You can choose to do just a result, just the temperature, or just a message like this one: welcome, take your temperature. One thing I wanted to touch on is we talked about activity logs, and when you say the word log doesn't make it sound magical as it is, but basically by virtue of tracking every phase that comes through and recognizing and producing those results. And a nice caveat here is phases that aren't used in identities are discarded, similarly to the way metadata expires after a while. When NX is in the mix, your metadata lives longer, it lives for as long as you desire it to do in the NX environment. But in Niro, if you don't use phases are discarded. But then those logs that you generate contain an immense amount of valuable information if you took the time to set them up with the labels that you want and appropriately. So you could discover insights and ask yourself questions such as, when have my VIPs been around the most? Or which department of my company shows up more than other? Or who is there earlier? Or who was there that wasn't supposed to be there? And the activity view lets you explore that. So the activity view is an unbounded log searching page that aims to produce insights for you to find, that you can navigate using the graph, and you can navigate using our filters to drill down to those groups. And you can export also eventually if you want to do further manipulation with that data. And you can use also the activity view to create identities and fix incorrect results. So it's a powerful tool if you need to know what's going on around your venue. And then ultimately the last point is alerts. Sometimes it's not about past consumption of info, it's more about knowing in real time what's going on so you can address it. So you can get real-time alerts on your push notifications and emails via Niro, but if you have NX in the mix, then all that metadata could be used to create rules and then trigger third-party actions and of any sort. So knowing in real time when something like that happens can be the difference between you addressing the situation in a promptly manner or not. And because we have a server on the edge running results, then the results are very, very quick. So enough of me talking. I'm going to jump quickly to the system. This is Niro in a nutshell. This is the way identities look like in Nirovision. I can quickly find myself. So a trace record of every event where I was recognized with all my metadata, that because there are a few thermal cameras in the mix, includes temperature results, but also custom metadata and my labels. And that means that I can go to my activity view and very quickly know, in terms of events, how many people were seen at each stage based on those labels. But now I can also focus my view on identity. So I can know how many distinct people were seen today. And this is today, but I can change this to a week and see how many people were seen in the last week in the office. I can navigate this using the graph, or if I don't want that graph, I can hide it altogether if I want more real estate. And I can also choose to, so this report also can be exported if you want to know quickly how many people were seen each day, each week, or each month. We sort it by event tone, but you can also run them by temperature results. And if you're also in events, you can do the same thing, display a graphic or hide it and navigate it. And at the same time, you can choose to focus your activity on full frames. You can decide if you're doing an investigation, maybe you want to look at bodies, you want to just narrow it down to faces. Or if you're in a quick mode, you can put it up in a list, entirely up to you, how you consume it. And also filtering it down by label. So I can find any label that I'm after and generate the list of people that were seen around that time. And each of these events then can be linked, or you can display them in the activity view, or you can create the equivalent contact tracing report that shows you, similar to what I've mentioned in the GIF, the list of events where I was seen across all cameras, ranked by traffic, who was there in frame with me in across the time frame that I selected, and who was seen at that location as well if I want to investigate a bit deeper. So for example, it looks like our building manager was seen also during that time of the day. I have the event, he was around the office. So imagine if he had, if we had a procedure in place where people would have to tap in, and he didn't have a card to tap in because he's the building manager, but he was in the venue around that time. If we had to let him know, Nirovision would have told me that he was seen there. So this is Niro, but I know that you guys want to see it next as well. So I'm going to pull up my NX environment and show you this metadata in Nx. Ignore this because I'm a bad demo setup person. There it is. So every event that I show you in Niro, because I have a rule set on the camera that says alert me every time that Eliana is seen. I have all my events syncing into Nx. I'm using Eliana, my identity name, in the captions to restrict the recognition custom event to only me, but you don't have to do that. You can sync every recognition, you can sync only a subsection of labels, or you can focus on a distinct individual. And because I'm also syncing faces, I can come to my objects tab and I can look, for example, for Vivian and get all the events where Vivian was seen. Here she's bringing Glenn's tea and getting her coffee in the morning. I can find myself as well. So if you want to know what I've been up to.
There's one thing I would add here, which is just if you watch the timeline at the bottom when Eliana does the search, right? This is what we were talking about at the beginning with you can search a year's worth of recorded data in less than a second for metadata or smart motion.
Yeah.
So if you go up there and you type Vivian again, you can see the timeline right now with Eliana's search results. But if she types Vivian, then you see that those instantly shift.
Yeah.
Right. And this is something that our developers are very proud of. And to be honest, it also is something that when we first launched the product really confused people because it was too fast. We actually had many feature requests asking us to add a little spinny thing for a few seconds because the customers were confused. And we said, no, we're not doing that. Everybody should catch up to what we're doing. Right? We're not going to make you wait for your results. We're going to give you your results right away. So.
Exactly. No, but it's I understand where you're coming from. The dial-up times, I can definitely relate to that.
Yeah, and if you have, you can run the other important thing is you can you go to the plugin settings that they can see that on the system side?
Yep.
So when you go to system administration plugins, you'll see all the plugins that are installed in a system, and you're not limited to a single plugin. If you've got Nirovision running, and then you've got, let's say, a license plate recognition system running as well, then both those plugins are going to be here. And then on the timeline, you're actually going to see multiple colors.
Yes.
So red is the motion detection, and then from that point on, I think the next one is yellow, and then you get greens and blues and stuff like that coming in. And in the future, we're going to make those colors customizable as well for our users. Yeah, so that's how the timeline works to kind of reflect. And of course, you can zoom into the timeline, any part of it, or you can use the date chooser to kind of go in and out of it. And on the rules engine as well, when you had the settings up for the rules engine, you can see the analytics event that Eliana set up here. She actually has it running across 2 cameras.
Mm-hmm.
She's got one rule that basically says, look for my faces across these 2 cameras. Obviously, you're going to have those cameras hooked into Nirovision, so you can't use them without licenses, which is very important, right? You can set up rules lots of different ways. You can have one rule run across all the cameras. You can have individual rules for individual cameras. In one of our upcoming releases, we're redoing that rules engine as well to allow you to do like if and function, rules, so that you'd be able to say let's say if Eliana and Matt are detected in the same screen, right? Then we know we have trouble. So we have to like have a rule going on, right? Or if you had a drink recognition platform running, you could say, if you see Eliana with Mata, then everything's okay, right? So basically those are some things that you guys should pay attention to. And then you're showing it right now, but when you double click on the object in the objects tab, then it'll just pop up that video and play it back for you. And that one thing as well is you may not see that objects tab right now if you have Nx Witness installed, but you don't have any plugins in your system. And plugins by default, you're not going to really have any unless, and this is a big unless, we have started supporting that metadata integration with specific camera manufacturers as well. Mm-hmm. So those plugins are built with the metadata SDK, and so they work just like this does. So if you have a camera with in-camera analytics that's driven by AI, then you're going to be able to see the metadata from those cameras as well come in, and you're going to be able to create rules just like this with Nirovision. So that's my spiel.
Perfect. Yeah, so I think I don't want to load I loaded the events. We looked at the faces and objects and custom rules, and I've showed you quite a few events. So every time that I'm crossing this camera, there's an equivalent event in NX. So the same way that I'm checking that I can look back at results in Nirovision, I can do the same in NX too. And yeah, and it's all coming out from rules and feeding off the system. So coming back to slides quickly. So to make this happen, as Tony mentioned, we are running off an integration plugin that we developed with the Meta SDK. So the version that we are talking about right now, version 1.7, is the latest that we have running. So after the webinar is done, the next step that I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the NESS Marketplace and update the Nirovision entry to match exactly what I'm saying in this slide. So this version of the plugin has a very simple setup. So Matt mentioned that he set up a system in 4 minutes and a little bit more. I did a video setting up the NX plugin with Niro, and it took me 1.5 minutes. Obviously, it's a simpler process and not comparable, but that's exactly what we're after, because as Tony mentioned and Matt mentioned as well, NX is all about flexibility and being simple to set up, and Nirovision has the exact same ethos. We want you to be up and running quickly, so we give you installers that take care of dependencies, so you don't have to think about that. Once you enable the plugin with the configuration I briefly showed you, you enable recording per camera, and you enable the plugin in NX, and it auto creates and auto configures the camera in Nirovision, so you don't have to do that twice. And the minute that you have a camera plugin under these circumstances, you start getting insights, and that is bounding box, label, and identity metadata overlaid on live video and historical, like I was showing you before. So you can go back to it at any time. We also sync the ability to create custom events for recognitions, unknowns, and temperature matches, so you can trigger real-time alerts in the form of push notification, email, or anything you can think of using third-party HTTP posts available in NX. And we also have widgets using the browser features that NX gives us, so you can open up your activity view or the dashboard and explore that in NX as well. So the benefit, obviously, outside of metadata is the fact that you can bring deep learning to any camera because you're using Nirovision's engine in the mix. And because NX is such a great and fruitful ecosystem, we support all powered by NX products by virtue of using these plugins. So no matter what flavor you're after, we have a plugin for you. And it's all working off a very simple architecture. So the way it works, when Nirovision is a standalone system, the RTSP is consumed straight from the Niro server. But when NX is in the mix, then what we do is we take a copy of the camera's RTSP stream via NX. And that way we can inject metadata back into the same stream with the appropriate timestamps, which it's more of an art form than science. And the server in Niro in this case is taking care of detection and recognition at the edge. So it processes footage, raw footage in real time to yield the results, and it keeps a copy, the most updated copy of your identity model on the edge. But it also syncs a copy of that to the cloud. We have our infrastructure that helps us power the apps, trigger notifications, and do all sorts of beautiful things. And that infrastructure also contains a copy of the model behind off. So if there's a problem with the server, you can bring it back. And this infrastructure also lets us power the apps. So that is the Doorkeeper app, the mobile apps, and the web app, where you consume information in two forms, in the form of activity you can review or in the form of alerts that you can react to in real time. So obviously, this is all powered by hardware. We talked about the server, and that is, a server is a low to mid-tier gaming machine. So a server with a GPU in the case of multi-camera setups. And that server is there to ingest an RTSP stream, to inference results and send results and metadata to the cloud. And obviously, as a byproduct of processing those feeds, we store footage on the server, but it has a rolling delete that will continuously clean out all footage first. So that's why, depending on your desired retention, using NX in the mix gives you endless retention if you have recording in those cameras. And it's a dedicated resource. So I know that all our NX prospects in the call are waiting to ask me if they can use the same server for Nirovision and NX. And the answer, sadly, for the time being is no. We need a dedicated resource, and that resource updates itself because we work on development cycles, so we're constantly pushing new features. And that server is flashed with a custom implementation of the Nirovision OS, so it becomes an appliance after installing. But the server is one of the pieces of the puzzle. The applications are the other piece, and we have mobile and web applications available for iOS and Android. And Doorkeeper, which is the display solution that runs on an iPad or an Apple TV. And the applications there are, the application's objective is to help you consume information in this meaningful manner, produce the reports that you're after, and bring you the results you want in real time. But obviously, the star of the show are the cameras. That's what unites us, all three of us here. Cameras that could be IP cameras, and camera agnostic is, in technical terms, means that any camera with a stream accessible via RTSP works. So it doesn't have to be a security camera. It needs to be a camera that streams an RTSP. But I'm very mindful of this because it's technically any camera works, but camera placement is such a key component of the success of the system that I don't want you to take camera agnostic like, oh yeah, any camera works, and that's it. So this is just to say that the camera can be flat, but we need to make sure the camera placement is optimal, and Glenn's gonna talk about that, so I'm not gonna step on his toes. Then cameras could also involve a notion of thermal technology. So if there's a thermal camera in the mix, we support a handful of models for the integration, and we have some code in the server that auto-configures them to the most optimal settings to guarantee that they're running how they should be. Or you can use a facial recognition terminal, which is another set of hardware that is great for checking a check-in experience. So this is just a handful of examples. But the point I wanted to make about cameras is that not every camera operates in the same fashion. So even though you can connect it to the system, it doesn't mean that the results are going to be great. There are a few recommendations that we give to every setup, but I also don't want you to take this as a recipe because every customer site is different. And I won't get tired of saying that. So we assess every case. We work very closely with our integration partners and our tech partners in the mix to make sure that the results that you're getting are optimal. But it takes work. It takes some back and forth. It's not every entrance has the same backlight. Not every corridor has the same type of traffic and whatnot. So this is just a few recommendations. Usually, one of the questions we get is, do I need to get a 4K camera for it? And the answer is no. Not every time more pixels is better. So resolution-wise, 2 megapixels or more is what we see in average. But there is no requirement to jump straight to 4K. Shutter speed is another one. We favor faster shutter speed over slower because that gives us better quality images. But that has a trade-off of producing darker images. So that's why low light capabilities in cameras are desirable. They usually tend to have bigger sensors, and that captures features in much more detail, which ultimately means better faces. So coming back to that slide where I was showing you all these faces, you want to get those faces to approximate what the base, what your identities look like, and that's one of the ways to do it. And of course, on top of that, you want to do choke points. So typical security cameras installed on angles, high end, producing images of people's top of their heads instead of front-facing traffic. And that obviously makes for a much harder problem to solve than if traffic is going straight at you with a narrow field of view. And frame rate and keyframe interval has to do with the server. The server is smart enough to use its resources in the most efficient manner. So when we detect motion on frame, we consume more resources at the server level to be more aggressive with FPS. And that's why we need to have at least 1 keyframe per second, because when the server isn't detecting any traffic, it defaults to monitoring keyframes only. Yeah. So if you have less than that, you may lose a little bit of activity. But I want you to tell me about this.
All right. Well, I was just going to mention that the top of my head is actually my best angle, so the cameras are perfect. Look, NESS is your one-stop shop for all the hardware. We have a large range of servers and a large range of cameras. But we also work very closely with Nirovision and Network Optix, Nx Witness. So depending on the job, depending on the solution you need, you really need to contact us and have a chat. Mm-hmm. We can go through what camera is going to be the best for you. There may be a camera on site that will already do the job. Mm-hmm. As Eliana said, there's a wide range of cameras that you can use, but they need to be in specific places, mm-hmm. Specific lighting, so on and so forth. So a solution is done on a site-by-site basis. We have a number of cameras set up at NESS. We can show you the results we're getting from those cameras in different angles, how they work, and we can move forward to help with any solution. One of the we've talked about the powerful points of Nirovision and Nx Witness, but NESS as a company, we feel that the power is not just in what they do, but how they do it. Nirovision and Nx Witness are very, very intuitive software platforms. And that's probably a key point for most of our customers. Our customers don't seem to want a software package where you need to take 5 days off and do 5 days worth of training, extensive training to know how to just set the system up. These are the sort of systems, if you get hold of, you get in front of a GUI, you can work your way around that GUI and find things quite easily. They're very graphical, easy, user-friendly systems. So that's a key point and the power of a system, because if it's hard to use, you're not going to use it. You're not going to get the most out of it. The other powerful point as far as NESS is concerned is, again, we've talked about cameras. You're not limited. There's not one camera you have to buy for this whole system to work.
That's right.
You're not limited by resolution, not limited by the style of camera. You're not limited by the manufacturer. I don't know, Tony, can you tell me exactly how many camera models that NX will bring up, mate? You got a rough idea?
Last time I checked, it was like 9,000. So, I mean, I'm loading our supported devices page right now, and it'll tell me once it's loaded. It takes, oh, here you go, 538 manufacturers, 9,104 devices.
Is that all?
Yeah.
Right. So we are limited, apparently, by camera manufacturers and models. No, look, that's again a powerful part of these systems. If you've got sites that already have cameras, you may be able to use those cameras. If you have a specific brand the customer wants, you can go down that path. Like I said, we've got a ton of hardware that will meet the specifications required. Just give us a call and we can work through that. Lastly, I just wanted to mention that we also support these software packages as well. So we have a tech support team in Sydney and around the country who are up to speed on NX, and they're working towards getting up to speed with Nirovision. So you'll have two layers of support with these companies. You'll have NESS and Nx Witness, or NESS and Nirovision. So hopefully we can meet everyone's needs, answer everyone's questions, and help you provide the best solution for your customer.
And NESS is not just your typical hardware provider either, right? You guys have actually done integration between us and third-party devices like the M1.
Yeah, so we're an engineering company, manufacturing company. Our M1 platform is a cross-platform controller. So basically, you can control anything. It has Ethernet, RS-232, open collector outputs. It can work with access control systems, CBus, Dynalite, KNX systems. You name it, we can control it. So it's another sort of.
To me, it was like the Doctor Who's like sonic screwdriver, but in keypad form. Like you could do whatever you wanted with that thing. So
exactly. So we've actually got sites where we haven't talked about them today, but NX has a soft buttons that you can create on the screen. So you can use them with your access control. If the security guard has to open a door, he can bring up the picture on the screen, and he sees the person he's going to let in. He can click that soft button without going across to another system. If you add Nirovision in and it picks up someone that's on the whitelist, it can go through the same platform through Nx Witness with an event, and then use the M1 to open that door. And then of course M1 can access access control hardware as well. So it's limitless. I mean, come to us with a solution you need, and give us a challenge.
Yeah, exactly. Come to us with a problem. Actually, we can help you solve it.
That's it. So we think this three-way sort of cross platform solution of two lots of software and let's call it unlimited hardware is going to really help us fill a hole that is there at the moment. We've got a lot of people come to us with thermal inquiries, face recognition. They want solutions for the times we're in at the moment with COVID. We've been moving forward with that. It's been successful so far, and we believe it's going to get better and better.
Awesome. So to wrap up this conversation, I wanted to make just a small point, and small because we did a great webinar yesterday where we discussed this in further detail. So I definitely encourage everyone who's curious about the state of legislation and privacy laws in Australia to check it out. But in a nutshell, I wanted to bring up the fact that we talked about embeddings briefly, and that means that every face that the system sees is transformed immediately into an numeric representation. And that is that fingerprint that you see there. And that embedding is what we end up comparing afterwards. So I know in principle, the first time you see the system, and especially when I'm demoing with all my permissions and everything is very exposed, you see those faces and you're not sure what's going on. each face is transformed into an embedding. And that is a protection that we take because those embeddings can be re-engineered into a face. So even if someone gets a hold of them, there's no way you can go back to what that face looked like. And one of the things that Sha mentioned yesterday in the webinar when it comes to handling sensitive information is precautions that you take. So obviously they gather consent, but store it securely. And talking about identifiable and de-identifiable info, the other point I wanted to make is every time I show Nirovision, my name is everywhere because I'm using names to identify my identities in the system, but you don't have to. An identity doesn't need a name. You can store an employee ID, you can store any reference that makes sense internally for you. And that way you're segregating your identifiable information from your unidentifiable information. And that is one of the precautions that the law dictates, at least in the realm of Australia. And use the information for the purpose you intended it when you collected consent. That's what Sha recommended. So talking about storing it securely, we work with Auth0 for authentication. That's a very international certified partner that manages every interaction we do in the apps. So every time someone logs into the mobile apps, the web app, or Doorkeeper itself, it goes through auth, and that auth is controlled by Auth0. So we're sure that every login is properly authenticated. And when we talk about the cloud infrastructure, we store our infrastructure in the Sydney node of AWS. And AWS in Australia got certified by the government to store protected information. So it's a incredibly sturdy and secure platform, and it's within the realms of the Australian territory, so the information doesn't leave the country. So precautions like this, but also working closely with partners such as NESS and such as Network Optix helps us guarantee that the deployment of the solution addresses not only the technical portion of things, but also the privacy concerns to put everyone's minds at ease, because we want to use the system to look after everyone. That's part of the ambitious vision that we have for Nirovision, make places smarter, safer, and more secure. So definitely, I know we haven't discussed pricing, and I know we haven't discussed hardware in further detail. So my call to action to everyone that's listening to us, whether you're doing it today, in the evening, or any day, reach out to us, message us, and involve your NX sales rep. So I have a chance to talk to Matt anytime I can, and bring in your NESS sales rep as well. So make sure to include all of us to bring up those topics of conversation. We'd be happy to brainstorm with you, and I'm just looking forward to all those problems. I don't know, didn't get a chance to ask if there've been any questions or anything. Tony, on your end, Matt, is there anything we haven't covered?
I know, like you're looking at these three companies. I mean, you can really create something that's unique. And Eliana mentioned pricing, but I think all three of these companies are extremely competitive in terms of like the products that we offer at the price level that we offer. So for us, I mean, pricing has never really been, it's been an advantage for the most part. I think Nirovision, I'm familiar with the pricing. I think it's pretty amazing. And I know the hardware that NESS is carrying is also really competitive stuff. So in terms of the type of solution that you can create these days, I mean, just versus a year ago, it's an amazing difference in terms of the technology that exists now. So even if you've got customers out there who have a system that you've put in place that maybe already use technology from Network Optix and NESS, for example, you know, the Nirovision solution just adds a tremendous amount of value now, especially with the COVID-19. And the fact that that type of pandemic and this type of response, like system that will allow you to respond to it, is going to be something I think that you're going to see just be persistent from now on. I mean, the world has changed this year. So, you know, these are value added solutions that you should definitely be talking to your customers about, even if they've got a system already, because I guarantee you that they're interested in it. And the privacy side of it, we had our discussion yesterday, but you know, a person, you don't necessarily need to know their face, but having the ability to pick out distinct individuals and pull demographic data and also just what they're wearing and everything else opens the door for retail analytics, you know, people flow analytics, determining, you know, in hotel lobbies, for example, how many people are coming in, how fast are they coming in. That ties together with elevators, right, and people moving technology. So you can just add a tremendous amount of value to even existing customers out there. This is a way to knock on their door and say, hey, you got to check this out, because I can guarantee you that they're going to be interested in it. So
awesome. You have said it better, Tony, and I think that's a very, very nice segue to end this webinar. Thank you so much, Tony and Matt, for joining us. And thank you so much, Glenn, for being here.
No problem, thank you.
I'm looking forward to hearing from you. So, yeah, feel free to send us your questions, your doubts, and your comments. And yeah, I'm excited to work with you. Thank you very much.
thank you guys.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys. Thank you. See you later.